She caught her billionaire fiancé in bed with her cheating MOM on the day she was supposed to marry. Her throat closed up, but no scream came. Her legs wanted to collapse, but somehow she remained standing. The woman who had built a successful business, who had negotiated million-dollar contracts, who had never backed down from a fight, stood frozen like a little girl who had just learned that monsters were real. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to have that trust destroyed in one moment? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She was 2 hours away from becoming a billionaire's wife when she opened the wrong door and discovered her mother in bed with her fiancé. The penthouse suite overlooked Miami's crystal waters, morning sun painting everything gold. Wedding dress hung like a promise against floor-to-ceiling windows, while Kayla's heart raced with anticipation. In just 2 hours, she would walk down the aisle to marry Richard Montgomery, the tech mogul who had swept her off her feet 18 months ago in New York City. Her hands shook as she applied the final touches of lipstick. Today was supposed to be perfect, the kind of day little girls dream about, the kind Atlanta never promised a girl from the projects. She had worked herself raw to get here, marketing executive, MBA from Emory, building her own consulting firm from nothing. Richard saw that drive in her, said it made him fall harder. The resort buzzed with 300 guests who had flown in from across the country. Politicians, tech giants, entertainment moguls, people whose names graced magazine covers now gathered to witness her fairy tale. Her phone lit up with congratulations from college friends, business associates, everyone celebrating the girl who had made it out and made it big. But something felt off this morning. Richard had been distant during the rehearsal dinner last night, checking his phone constantly, whispering with her mother Denise in corners. When Kayla asked about it, he brushed it off as last-minute business calls. The merger with Patterson Industries was closing next week, he explained, right after their honeymoon in Santorini. She walked toward the bridal suite's second bedroom to grab her grandmother's pearl earrings. The something old that would connect her to family who couldn't be here to see this moment. Her bare feet made no sound on the marble floors as she approached the partially open door. The sounds hit her first. Low moans, skin against skin. Her brain tried to process what couldn't be real, what couldn't be happening 2 hours before her wedding. She pushed the door open wider. Richard's back was to her, muscles tensing as he moved above someone on the white sheets. The woman's legs were wrapped around his waist, her head thrown back in pleasure, dark hair spilled across the pillow. It was her mother, 53-year-old Denise Washington, who had flown in from Charlotte 3 days ago with tears in her eyes, so proud of her baby girl marrying a billionaire. The same woman who had raised Kayla alone, working double shifts at the textile factory, sacrificing everything so her daughter could have chances she never did. The engagement ring on Kayla's finger suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. The diamond Richard had slipped on her hand during that magical evening in Central Park, when he got down on one knee and promised her the world. The same hands now gripping her mother's hips were the ones that had held her face and sworn eternal love. Neither of them saw her standing there. They were lost in each other, in whatever twisted version of passion had bloomed between them, while Kayla planned centerpieces and chose menu options. How long had this been going on? How many times had they touched while she talked about forever? Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to have that trust destroyed in one moment? Tell me in the comments what you would do if you discovered the two people you loved most betraying you on what should have been the happiest day of your life. Her throat closed up, but no scream came. Her legs wanted to collapse, but somehow she remained standing. The woman who had built a successful business, who had negotiated million-dollar contracts, who had never backed down from a fight, stood frozen like a little girl who had just learned that monsters were real. She closed the door silently, her engagement ring suddenly feeling like a shackle. In 2 hours, 300 guests would be waiting. But the woman walking down that aisle wouldn't be the same one who woke up that morning. She had two choices: expose them immediately or play the perfect bride while planning her revenge. The bathroom mirror reflected a face she barely recognized. Same brown eyes, Same full lips, same high cheekbones that had graced magazine covers when Richard first started taking her to charity galas. But something behind those eyes had changed forever. The innocence was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. Makeup artists knocked on the suite door, their voices bright with pre-wedding excitement. "Kayla, honey, we need to start on your face. The photographer wants to capture the getting ready shots." She forced her voice to work. "Give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to decide whether to burn everything down right now or wait for the perfect moment to strike. 5 minutes to choose between the quick satisfaction of screaming the truth or the strategic pleasure of watching them squirm." The shower water ran hot against her skin as she tried to wash off the image of Richard's hands on her mother. But some stains go deeper than soap can reach. Her body remembered every time he had touched her the same way, every whispered promise, every night she had given herself to him completely while he was already planning to take her mother too. When she emerged from the bathroom, the suite had filled with her bridal party. 6 women from different phases of her life, college friends, business partners, her cousin Maya from Atlanta, who had always been more sister than family. They chatted about hair and makeup, about the gorgeous weather, about how lucky she was to be marrying Miami's most eligible bachelor. "Girl, you're glowing this morning," Maya said, popping a strawberry into her mouth from the breakfast spread. "Love looks good on you." If only she knew what that glow really was. Not love, fury. Pure, concentrated rage wrapped in designer silk and pearls. The makeup artist, a bubbly woman named Carmen, started applying foundation while chattering about other celebrity weddings she had worked. "I've done 3 billionaire weddings this year, honey, and none of them looked as happy as you do right now." Kayla smiled on cue, said the right words, played the part of the blushing bride. But inside, her mind raced through options. She could text Richard right now, "I know about you and my mother." She could call off the wedding, send everyone home, file for the return of gifts. Clean, simple, immediate. Or she could let them think they had one. Let them believe their secret was safe while she gathered evidence, made plans, prepared for total war. Richard appeared in the doorway, looking devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo. The same chest she had run her hands across last night, the same arms that had held her close, the same mouth that had whispered how much he loved her while planning to steal everything she thought they were building together. "You look incredible," he said, crossing the room to kiss her cheek. His lips felt like poison against her skin. Carmen and the bridal party melted at his romantic gesture. "Ah, you two are just perfect," someone cooed. Richard's eyes searched her face, and for a moment, she wondered if he could sense the change in her, if he knew that she knew. But then he smiled that million-dollar smile that had first captured her attention in that Manhattan conference room. "I can't wait to marry you," he murmured against her ear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I can't wait either," she replied, her voice steady as stone. "Would you confront betrayal immediately or wait for the perfect moment? What's your revenge style? Quick and explosive or slow and calculated? Tell me in the comments, because this decision was about to change everything." When Richard whispered, "I love you," against her ear, she whispered back, "I know exactly who you are." He thought it was romantic. He had no idea it was a declaration of war. Every relationship has an origin story, but some beginnings predict the ending. 18 months earlier, the conference room in Manhattan sparkled with opportunity. When Richard's eyes met hers across the boardroom table, neither expected their professional meeting to ignite something that would burn everything down. Kayla had flown up from Atlanta to pitch her marketing firm's services to Montgomery Tech's new social media platform launch. She had worked for 3 weeks straight preparing that presentation, knowing this contract could change her life. Her small firm needed a major client to break into the big leagues. Richard sat at the head of the polished table, surrounded by executives in $1,000 suits. But when she started talking about consumer psychology and brand loyalty, his full attention locked onto her. Not just her ideas, the way she commanded the room, the passion in her voice, the confidence that came from knowing her worth. "Your approach is exactly what we need," he had said after her presentation. "When can you start?" The celebration dinner that night was supposed to be professional. Just her and the Montgomery tech team at some upscale restaurant in Midtown. But when Richard suggested they continue the conversation over drinks, just the two of them, professional became personal faster than either anticipated. "I don't usually do this," she had said when he walked her back to her hotel. "Do what?" His voice was low, intimate, dangerous. Mixed business with pleasure. He stopped walking, turned to face her under the glow of streetlights. "What if I promised to make it worth breaking your rules?" The kiss that followed was everything she had never allowed herself to want. Hungry, desperate, the kind of passion that makes smart women do stupid things. His hands tangled in her hair, pressing her against the hotel's brick wall while Manhattan buzzed around them. 3 hours later, she was in his penthouse apartment, her business suit scattered across his bedroom floor. He touched her like she was precious, like she was something he had been searching for his whole life. When she whispered that she had never felt anything like this, he kissed her deeper and promised she never would with anyone else. Do you believe in love at first sight or lust at first sight? Share your first meeting stories below, because they started with fireworks and ended in flames. The next 6 months were a blur of private jets between Atlanta and New York, of him flying down to meet her friends, of business trips that became romantic getaways. He integrated himself into her life seamlessly, charming her small circle, impressing her business associates, making her believe she had found her match. Richard was everything her previous relationships hadn't been. Generous without being controlling, successful without being arrogant, passionate without being possessive. He listened when she talked about growing up poor in Atlanta, about her mother working herself sick to pay for Kayla's education, about her dreams of building something that would last. "I want to take care of you," he had said one night as they lay tangled in his silk sheets. "I can take care of myself," she had replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "I know you can. That's what makes me want it even more." The proposal came on their 1-year anniversary. Central Park in the snow, down on one knee beside the fountain where they had shared their first New York picnic. The ring was flawless, 3 carats, emerald cut, exactly what she would have chosen if she had dared to dream that big. "Marry me," he had said, his breath visible in the cold air. "Move to Miami with me. Build an empire together." She said yes because she believed in fairy tales, because she thought good things happened to girls who worked hard enough. Because when he looked at her, she felt like she could conquer the world. But 3 months into their engagement, during a casual dinner conversation, Richard made a comment that should have been a warning. "I've never met a woman I couldn't have." Kayla laughed then, thinking he was joking about his bachelor days. She wasn't laughing now, because standing in that bridal suite, remembering how their love story began, she realized something terrifying. The same charm he had used to win her was the exact same charm he was using on her mother. The same lines, the same moves, the same promises. Richard Montgomery didn't fall in love. He collected trophies, and somehow, she and her mother had both become prizes in a game they didn't even know they were playing. She brought her mother to meet the man she loved, never imagining she was introducing a predator to prey. The Uber pulled up Richard's circular driveway, like something out of a movie. Denise Washington stepped out onto marble stones, her Charlotte thrift store dress clashing with imported Italian cypress trees and fountains that cost more than her annual salary. "Baby girl, this is how your man lives?" Denise whispered, clutching her worn purse tighter as they approached the front door. Kayla had been nervous about this visit for weeks, not because she was ashamed of her mother, but because their worlds were so different. Richard's Miami mansion sat on 3 acres of waterfront property, complete with tennis court, infinity pool, and a dock where his yacht waited like a floating palace. Denise had raised her alone after Kayla's father disappeared when she was 7. Worked double shifts at the textile factory, sometimes triple when bills got tight. Never remarried, never dated seriously, devoted her entire life to making sure her daughter had opportunities she never did. "This is temporary," Denise always said about their cramped apartment in Charlotte. "You're going to have better than this." Now, 22 years later, watching her mother's eyes widen at Richard's wealth, Kayla felt the distance between their realities like a physical ache. Richard greeted them at the door, and Kayla watched her mother transform. The tired woman who cleaned office buildings at night and raised a daughter during the day suddenly stood straighter, smiled brighter, became someone new under his attention. "Mrs. Washington," Richard said, taking her hand in both of his. "Kayla gets her beauty from you, doesn't she?" The compliment made Denise blush like a teenager. "Oh, stop that nonsense. She gets her brains from me. That's what matters." But Richard held her hand a beat too long, let his eyes linger on her face with an intensity that made Kayla's stomach tighten. She dismissed it as her imagination. Richard was naturally charming. That's all. He made everyone feel special. Have you ever introduced someone you loved to family and immediately regretted it? Tell me about family dynamics that went wrong because this introduction was about to destroy everything. Over dinner that first night, Denise shared stories Kayla had heard 1,000 times. Growing up poor in rural North Carolina, getting pregnant at 19, working her fingers raw to give her daughter chances. But the way Richard listened made those familiar stories sound new, important, worthy of a billionaire's attention. "You're an incredible woman," he told Denise over dessert. "Raising Kayla alone, building her into the success she is today. That takes real strength." Denise glowed under his praise in a way that made Kayla uncomfortable. Her mother had spent decades putting everyone else first, denying herself romance, companionship, joy. Now here was this powerful, attractive man treating her like she mattered. "Mama, tell him about the time you worked 3 jobs to pay for my SAT prep," Kayla said, trying to redirect the energy. But Richard's focus remained on Denise. "3 jobs? How did you manage that?" As her mother launched into another story, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then excused himself to take a call. Through the glass doors to the terrace, Kayla watched him pace while talking, his free hand running through his hair in the way it did when he was stressed. "He's wonderful, baby," Denise said once they were alone. "And he looks at you like you hung the moon." But that wasn't what worried Kayla. It was how he had been looking at her mother. When Richard returned, he seemed different, more focused on Denise, asking questions about her life in Charlotte, her work, her dreams. "You should stay longer," he suggested. "Kayla's been so busy with wedding planning. I'm sure she'd love more time with you." Denise's face lit up. "I couldn't impose, Dash." "It's not imposing. The guest house is just sitting empty. Stay as long as you want." That night, Kayla found Richard and her mother talking quietly on the terrace. When she approached, they jumped apart like teenagers caught kissing. Just didn't know each other. Richard smiled, but something in his voice had changed. The lie came so easily. Kayla wondered how many others she had missed. Her mother looked flustered, excited, different. "He was just telling me about his charity work. Such a good man, Kayla." But as they said goodnight and headed to their separate rooms, Kayla caught the look that passed between them. Electric, dangerous. The same look Richard used to give her before he would pull her into dark corners and kiss her breathless. Her mother was 53 years old, had been alone for over 2 decades, and was being seduced by a man who collected women like art pieces. And the worst part? Denise didn't even know she was being hunted. Love makes you blind, but money makes people desperate enough to steal what isn't theirs. Denise's 3-day visit stretched into a week, then 2. Each morning, Kayla woke up to find her mother and Richard deep in conversation over coffee, their heads bent together like conspirators sharing secrets. When she joined them, the easy intimacy would shift, become forced, artificial. "We were just talking about the foundation," Richard would say, and Denise would nod eagerly, playing along with whatever cover story they had rehearsed. What foundation? This was the first Kayla had heard of any charitable work beyond the standard tax-deductible donations his accountants recommended. But apparently, Richard had developed a sudden passion for helping single mothers in Charlotte. How convenient. Miami nights painted everything in neon and shadow. From her bedroom window, Kayla watched her mother and fiancé by the pool, their body language speaking a language she didn't want to understand. Denise had bought new clothes, expensive ones that Richard must have paid for. designer swimsuits that showed off a figure most 53-year-olds would envy, flowing sundresses that made her look younger, more alive than Kayla had seen her in years. "Your mama's really something," Richard said one night as they lay in bed after making love. But his mind seemed elsewhere, distant. "She's been alone too long," Kayla replied, testing him. "Maybe she'll meet someone nice here in Miami." Richard's body tensed beside her. "Maybe she will." The way he said it made her blood run cold. When your gut tells you something's wrong, but your heart wants to believe otherwise, which do you trust? Share your experiences, because Kayla was about to learn that intuition is usually right. The business meetings started the second week. Hush phone calls that ended when Kayla entered rooms. Documents spread across Richard's home office desk that got quickly shuffled away when she brought him coffee. Legal papers with her name on them that he claimed were just standard merger stuff. "Since when do I need to be involved in Patterson Industries?" she asked one evening. "It's nothing major. Just some paperwork since we'll be married soon. Joint financial planning." But when she pressed for details, he changed the subject. Pulled her close, kissed her neck, used physical intimacy to distract her from questions that made him uncomfortable. His hands knew exactly how to make her forget what she was asking, exactly how to make her meld against him until business was the last thing on her mind. Except lately, even his touch felt different. Mechanical, like he was going through motions while thinking about someone else. 3 weeks into her mother's visit, Kayla found a text message on Richard's phone when he left it on the kitchen counter during his morning run. "Tonight, same place." She can't know. Her hand shook as she stared at the screen. The number wasn't saved in his contacts, but she recognized it. Her mother's cell phone. When Richard returned, sweaty and glowing from his 5-mile run, she was waiting with coffee and what she hoped looked like a normal smile. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing her expression. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be? You just look, I don't know, tense." She held up his phone. This was buzzing. Looked like an important business message. Richard's face went pale for just a second before he recovered. "Thanks, baby. Probably just Patterson's lawyers. You know how these merger deals are, always some crisis." But Patterson Industries had never texted him at night, had never used burner numbers, had never required meetings at the same place where she can't know. That night, after Richard claimed he had to go handle a business emergency, Kayla drove around Miami until she found him. A small, intimate restaurant in South Beach where her mother sat across from her fiancé, holding hands over candlelight like lovers. She watched through the window as Richard lifted Denise's hand to his lips, kissed her fingers while she giggled like a schoolgirl, watched him pay the check and lead her mother to his car, his hand possessive on the small of her back. Kayla followed them to a hotel, watched them walk inside together, Richard's arm around her mother's waist, Denise looking up at him with worship in her eyes. Some business transactions, she realized, happened in bedrooms, and the commodity being sold was her own future. She thought she was planning a wedding, but they were planning a hostile takeover. The law office in downtown Miami gleamed with floor-to-ceiling windows and mahogany that smelled like power. Documents spread across the conference table told a story of theft disguised as love. Kayla sat in the waiting room, pretending to read a magazine while her private investigator, Marcus Chun, delivered the evidence she had paid him to gather. 3 days of following them. 3 days of photographing secret meetings, recording conversations, documenting a conspiracy that went far beyond an affair. What Marcus found made her stomach turn and her bank account tremble. "Your mother's been meeting with Patterson Industries executives," Marcus had explained that morning over coffee. Not just random meetings, strategic sessions about the merger. The merger that was supposed to happen after the wedding. The business deal that would combine Richard's tech empire with Patterson's manufacturing power, creating a billion-dollar corporation. The same merger Kayla thought she understood until she saw the real paperwork. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard, running late for lunch. "Business stuff. Love you. Business stuff, right?" The kind of business that required her mother's signature on documents Kayla had never seen. Marcus slid a manila folder across the cafe table. "You're not going to like what's inside." The prenuptial agreement had been modified, Instead of protecting her interests like Richard promised, the new version gave him complete control over her consulting firm, her personal assets, even her intellectual property. But the real shock was the signature page, her mother's name right next to a clause that made Denise a beneficiary of the post-merger profits. "She's not just sleeping with your fiancé," Marcus said quietly. "She's getting paid for it. Have you ever realized someone was using you while pretending to love you?" How did you handle the revelation that your entire relationship was a business transaction? The wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was a corporate acquisition. Richard would gain control of her successful marketing firm, her client base, her reputation in the industry. After the marriage, her business would be absorbed into his empire, and she would become an employee in her own company. But her mother's involvement made it personal. Denise wasn't just betraying her daughter's trust. She was actively participating in stealing Kayla's life's work. The foundation Richard kept mentioning, it was real, but it wasn't charity. It was a shell company designed to funnel money to Denise while keeping her quiet about the affair. Kayla's hand shook as she read through bank statements Marcus had obtained. Payments to her mother dating back 6 weeks. $25,000 transferred to Denise's Charlotte checking account the same day she extended her Miami visit. Another $50,000 the week she started wearing designer clothes. Her mother was being paid to seduce Richard. Or maybe Richard was paying her to betray Kayla. Either way, their affair wasn't passion. It was a business arrangement with her destruction as the end goal. The elevator in Richard's office building felt like a tomb as she rode up to the 40th floor. The receptionist smiled and waved her through to his corner office, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Biscayne Bay. This was where she had first felt impressed by his success, intimidated by his power. Now it just looked like what it was, a predator's lair. Richard stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly as he talked. When he saw her, his face lit up with that million-dollar smile. "I have to go," he said into the phone. "My beautiful fiancé just walked in." He hung up and crossed the room to kiss her, but Kayla stepped back. "We need to talk." Something in her voice made him pause. "Everything okay?" She pulled the modified prenup from her purse and placed it on his desk. "Want to explain why my mother's name is on our marriage contract?" Richard's face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, then smooth confidence. "Kayla, I can explain, Dash. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explaining things. Like how business meetings happen in hotel bedrooms. Like how charity foundations pay my mother more than she makes in a year at the factory." His jaw tightened. "You hired someone to follow us. I hired someone to find the truth. Turns out the truth was expensive, but not as expensive as marrying you would have been." Richard moved around his desk, hands raised like he was approaching a wild animal. "Baby, listen to me. Yes, I've been helping your mother financially. Yes, we've grown close. But this isn't what you think, Dash." "Really?" "Because what I think is that you've been planning to steal my business, destroy my independence, and use my own mother to do it. What I think is that this whole relationship has been one long con game." "That's not true. Prove it." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since she had known him, he had no smooth words, no charming deflection, no easy lies. "The wedding's off," Kayla said, pulling her engagement ring from her finger. The 3-carat diamond felt heavy as she placed it on his desk. "And if you or my mother come near me again, Marcus has instructions to release everything to the Miami Herald." She turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "You can't do this, Kayla. The merger depends on our marriage. Patterson Industries has already invested millions based on our combined assets. If you walk away now, you'll destroy more than just us." She looked back at him, this man she had loved, this predator who had almost consumed her whole. "That's the point," she said. "Sometimes you have to burn everything down to stop the fire from spreading." The elevator doors closed on Richard's stunned face, and for the first time in weeks, Kayla felt like she could breathe. The rehearsal dinner should have been a celebration, but it felt like her last meal before execution. The oceanfront restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Fairy lights reflected off the water like fallen stars, but the magic felt forced, like a stage production with unrehearsed actors. 300 guests have flown in for tomorrow's wedding, and none of them knew they were about to witness the most expensive divorce that never happened. Kayla sat at the head table, her smile so perfect it hurt her face. To her left, Richard played the part of devoted groom, his hand possessive on her thigh under the white tablecloth. To her right, her mother glowed in a designer dress that cost more than most people's rent, playing the role of proud parent while secretly counting the money she was being paid to destroy her own daughter. "You look beautiful tonight," Richard whispered in her ear, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. His breath smelled like expensive whiskey and lies. "So do you," she replied, her voice sweet as poison. The guests had no idea they were watching theater. CEOs, politicians, entertainment moguls, all gathered to celebrate what they believed was a love story. If only they knew they were actually attending a funeral for trust, family, and everything Kayla had thought was real. Maya, her cousin from Atlanta, raised her glass during the toasts. "To my girl Kayla, who proves that good things happen to people who work their asses off for them." The crowd cheered. Richard squeezed her hand. Her mother beamed with false pride. Kayla wanted to vomit. Have you ever had to smile and pretend everything was fine when your world was falling apart? How did you survive those moments when everyone around you believed a lie you couldn't expose yet? The dinner courses came and went. Appetizers she couldn't taste. Entrees she couldn't swallow. Richard's business partners made speeches about power couples and empire building. Her college friends shared embarrassing stories about her dating disasters before she met the one. If only they knew the one was actually the one who almost stole everything. Denise stood up when the formal toasts ended, her voice carrying across the restaurant's outdoor terrace. "I want to say something about my daughter." The crowd quieted, expecting maternal wisdom about love and marriage. "Kayla has always been my pride and joy," Denise began, her words slightly slurred from champagne she wasn't used to drinking. "She's strong, she's smart, she's everything I wanted to be but never could be." Kayla's chest tightened. Even now, even knowing what her mother had done, hearing those words still hurt. "And Richard," Denise continued, turning to face him with eyes full of something that definitely wasn't maternal affection. "You make my baby happy. You make her feel special. You make her feel loved." The way she said loved made Kayla's skin crawl, like it was a private joke between her mother and her fiancé. "To family," Denise raised her glass, eyes locked on Richard, "and to getting everything we deserve." The words hit Kayla like a slap. Everyone else heard a touching mother's blessing. Kayla heard a threat. Richard stood and pulled Kayla to her feet, his arm tight around her waist. "Thank you, Denise. That means everything coming from you." The kiss he gave Kayla was passionate enough to make the crowd whistle and cheer. But his lips felt cold against hers, mechanical, like he was kissing her for the cameras while thinking about someone else. When they broke apart, Kayla caught her mother's expression. Jealousy. Raw, naked jealousy that she tried to hide behind her champagne glass. Her mother wasn't just being paid to seduce Richard. She was actually falling for him. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Denise wanted what her daughter had, and she was willing to destroy everything to get it. The party moved inside as the ocean breeze picked up. Richard worked the room like the politician he should have been, shaking hands and making promises about the future. Kayla watched him charm Patterson Industries executives, watched him joke with tech moguls, watched him build the empire he planned to steal from her. "You okay, cousin?" Maya appeared at her side, concern in her voice. "You seem off tonight." "Just wedding nerves," Kayla lied. "Richard treating you right? Because if he's not, you know I'll cut him." If only it were that simple. If only the solution was violence instead of strategic warfare. "He's perfect," Kayla said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. As the evening wound down, guests began filtering back to their hotel rooms and vacation rentals. Tomorrow's ceremony was set for 3 p.m., followed by a reception that would last until midnight. The perfect ending to the perfect love story. Except tomorrow wasn't going to be perfect. Tomorrow was going to be carnage. Richard walked her to her car, his hand warm on the small of her back. "One more night," he said softly, Then you'll be Mrs. Montgomery forever. Forever, she repeated, like it was a promise instead of a threat. He kissed her goodnight, slow and deep, putting on a show for the guests who were still watching. When he pulled away, his eyes searched her face. I love you, Kayla, more than I've ever loved anyone. The scary thing was he might actually believe that. Predators always justified their hunting. I love you too, she said, and for the first time all evening, she was telling the truth. She did love him. That's what made tomorrow so hard. That's what made this betrayal cut so deep. You can't really destroy someone unless you love them first. During the toasts, Denise raised her glass. To family, she said, eyes locked on Richard, and to getting everything we deserve. The words followed her into dreams. Tomorrow's wedding suddenly felt like a funeral. Some discoveries can't be undone, and some betrayals cut so deep they change your DNA. Room 2047 was supposed to be storage for wedding gifts. Crystal vases, silver picture frames, expensive kitchen gadgets from guests who thought they were celebrating love. Instead, it became the crime scene where her future died and her strength was born. The morning sun streamed through Miami's resort windows as Kayla made her final preparations. Hair pinned in soft curls, makeup applied by hands that shook despite their owner's determination. The dress hung perfect and white, waiting to be worn by a bride who no longer existed. She had spent 3 sleepless nights planning this moment. Not the wedding, the confrontation. Every word calculated, every move strategic. This wasn't going to be a screaming match or a breakdown. This was going to be an execution, performed with surgical precision in front of an audience that paid thousands to attend. But first, she needed her grandmother's pearl earrings. The something old that would connect her to women who had survived worse betrayals than this. The earrings were locked in the resort's secure storage room, along with other precious items guests had brought for the ceremony. The walk down the marble hallway felt like walking to her own funeral. Each step echoed in the empty corridor, her bare feet silent on stone that cost more per square foot than most people's cars. 3 doors down from the bridal suite, she slipped the key card into room 2047. The sounds hit her first, low moans that froze her blood, the wet sound of skin moving against skin. Her brain tried to process what her heart already knew, what she had suspected but hoped wasn't true. She pushed the door open wider. Richard's back faced her, muscles flexing as he moved above the woman beneath him. His skin was tan from their recent vacation to the Bahamas, same back she had traced with her fingers just days ago, the same shoulder she had gripped when he made love to her with words of forever on his lips. The woman's legs were wrapped around his waist, her heels digging into his lower back. Dark hair spread across white pillows like spilled wine. Her head was thrown back in pleasure, mouth open in a silent scream of satisfaction. It was her mother, 53-year-old Denise Washington, who had raised her alone after Kayla's father abandoned them. The woman who worked double shifts so her daughter could have dance lessons, who sat in hospital waiting rooms when Kayla broke her arm in 3rd grade, who cried with pride at her college graduation. The same hands that had braided Kayla's hair before school were now clawing at Richard's back. The same mouth that had kissed scraped knees and sung lullabies was now moaning his name like a prayer. God, Richard, yes, her mother whispered, voice thick with need. She'll never know. She'll never have to know. Richard's response was muffled against her mother's neck, but Kayla caught the words that shattered what was left of her world. After tomorrow, it won't matter what she knows. The merger will be final. Everything will be ours. Ours. Not his and Kayla's. His and her mother's. The engagement ring on Kayla's finger suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The same ring Richard had slipped onto her hand during that magical evening in Central Park, when he promised her the world, and she believed fairy tales came true for girls like her. What's worse, being betrayed by someone you love or someone you trusted with your life? Tell me, which betrayal cuts deeper, because Kayla was about to find out they were the same wound. Neither of them saw her standing there. They were lost in each other, in whatever sick version of passion had bloomed while Kayla planned centerpieces and chose wedding favors. How long had this been going on? How many times had they touched while she talked about forever? Her mother's body arched beneath Richard's, and Kayla saw something that made her stomach turn. Love. Real, desperate, consuming love in her mother's face. This wasn't just about money or revenge or business deals. Denise had fallen for him, actually fallen for the man who was using her to destroy her own daughter. I love you, her mother gasped as Richard moved deeper. I've never felt anything like this. I know, baby, Richard replied, his voice gentle in a way that used to make Kayla melt. After tomorrow, we won't have to hide anymore. Baby. He called her Mother Baby, the same pet name he whispered to Kayla during their most intimate moments. The same word he had used when he proposed, when he made love to her, when he promised her everything she had ever wanted. The grotesque contrast between their naked bodies and Kayla's wedding dress hanging in the next room made reality crystal clear. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. They weren't just stealing her money or her business. They were stealing her identity, her future, her ability to trust anyone ever again. The door creaked as she shifted her weight, and suddenly Richard's head turned. Their eyes met across the room, his wide with shock, hers cold with a fury that could melt steel. Kayla dash. He started, but she held up one hand to stop him. Her mother's head snapped around, face flushed with pleasure and shame. Baby, this isn't Dash. What looks like? Kayla's voice was steady as stone. Really? Because what it looks like is my mother and my fiancé fucking in a storage room 2 hours before my wedding. Richard scrambled to cover himself with the hotel sheet, but the damage was done. Kayla had seen everything. The passion, the intimacy, the love that should have been hers. We can explain, Richard said, his voice desperate in a way she had never heard before. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explaining things. Like how you've been planning to steal my business. Like how you've been paying my mother to betray me. Like how this whole relationship has been one long con game. Her mother pulled the sheet up to her chin, tears starting to fall. Kayla, please Dash. Please what? Please pretend I didn't just watch my own mother destroy my life. Please act like you haven't been working together to steal everything I've built. As she stood in that doorway, dress in hand, Richard said the words that sealed his fate. Baby, I can't explain. But Kayla was done listening. She was ready to start talking. And what she was about to say would burn their world to the ground. Revenge is a dish best served in a wedding dress, in front of 300 witnesses. Her reflection in the bridal suite mirror showed a woman transformed. Same face, same dress, but behind her eyes burned something new. The kind of fire that builds empires or burns them down. In 30 minutes, 300 guests would gather for a wedding. In 45 minutes, they would witness an execution. The pearl earrings felt cold against her neck as she fastened them, her grandmother's gift carrying the strength of women who had survived worse betrayals than this. Southern women didn't just endure, they conquered. And today, Kayla was about to remind everyone why you should never underestimate a girl from Atlanta who had clawed her way to the top. Maya knocked on the suite door, her voice bright with pre-ceremony excitement. Kayla, honey, it's time. The photographer wants to get some shots of you before we head to the chapel. Send him in, Kayla called back, her voice steady as steel. The photographer, a nervous man named David, entered with his assistant trailing behind. You look absolutely radiant, he gushed, adjusting his camera settings. This is going to be magical. Magical. If only he knew what kind of magic she was about to perform. As David snapped photos, Kayla's mind raced through her final preparations. The speech was memorized, every word calculated for maximum impact. The evidence was secured. Marcus had copies of everything, ready to release to the media if anything went wrong. Her lawyer had the updated will and business documents that would protect her assets from whatever legal warfare was about to begin. Richard had tried calling 6 times since their confrontation in the storage room. 6 desperate voicemails that went from pleading to angry to threatening. She hadn't listened to any of them. Words were cheap, and it had already cost her everything. Her mother had sent 17 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Please call me. Let me explain. It's not what you think. I love you. The last one just said, I'm sorry, with crying emojis like emoticons could fix what she had broken. If you had the power to expose someone publicly, would you do it? What would it take for you to go nuclear? Because Kayla was about to show 300 people what happens when you steal from the wrong woman. Maya appeared in the doorway, beautiful in her bridesmaid dress, completely unaware that her cousin was about to detonate a bomb. Ready to become Mrs. Montgomery? Kayla's laugh was sharp as broken glass. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The walk to the chapel felt like walking into battle. Resort staff lined the hallways, smiling and congratulating her as she passed. Beautiful day for a wedding. You look like a princess. So romantic. If only they knew they were about to witness the most expensive revenge in Miami history. The chapel doors stood open, revealing 300 guests in their finest clothes. Politicians, tech moguls, entertainment executives, the kind of people who moved markets with phone calls and toppled governments with donations, all gathered to celebrate what they believed was love. Through the open doors, she could see Richard at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo. The same man who had swept her off her feet in Manhattan, who had promised her the world, who had made her believe in fairy tales. He looked nervous, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He should be nervous. Her mother sat in the front row, dressed in designer silk that he had probably bought her. Denise's makeup was perfect, but Kayla could see the red rims around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her purse. Good. She should be scared. The wedding planner, a stressed woman named Patricia, appeared at Kayla's side. Oh my God, you look incredible. Are you ready? The musicians are in position. The officiant is waiting. Everyone's seated dash. I'm ready, Kayla said, cutting her off. The bridal march began, those familiar notes that were supposed to signal the happiest moment of a woman's life. Instead, they sounded like a funeral dirge for everything she had once believed about love, family, and trust. Her newfound power made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced. Every eye in that chapel was about to focus on her, and she was going to give them a show they would never forget. The victims of the world stayed silent. The survivors spoke up. And the winners? The winners burned it all down and built something better from the ashes. At 3 p.m., guests would gather for a wedding. At 3:30, they would witness an execution. The only question remaining: who would survive the bloodbath she was about to unleash? She walked down that aisle like a queen approaching her coronation, knowing she was about to dethrone a king. 300 guests rose as she appeared at the chapel entrance. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting everything in jewel tones. It was beautiful enough to be a fairy tale, if fairy tales ended in public executions. The chapel fell silent except for the wedding march, every eye fixed on the bride who was about to rewrite the definition of "till death do us part." Cameras flashed as society photographers captured what they thought was the beginning of a love story. Instead, they were documenting the first moments of a war. Kayla's heels clicked against marble floors as she walked alone down the aisle. No father to give her away. He had abandoned the family when she was 7. No one to hand her over to another man, because she belonged to herself. She had always belonged to herself, even when she was stupid enough to think she belonged to Richard. Her eyes found Richard at the altar, and she felt nothing. No love, no anger, no sadness. Just cold calculation and the kind of clarity that comes when someone strips away your last illusion. He looked terrified, which was smart. He should be terrified. Maya walked behind her as maid of honor, completely unaware that she was participating in a public assassination. The other bridesmaids followed, all of them beaming with joy for their friend's special day. If only they knew that special days sometimes involve special kinds of destruction. In the front row, her mother sat frozen like a deer in headlights. Denise's hands clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Good. She should hold on tight to whatever money Richard had paid her, because it was about to be the most expensive mistake of her life. Have you ever had a moment where you felt completely powerful, where you knew you held all the cards? Share that feeling, because Kayla was about to show 300 people what real power looked like. The officiant, a distinguished man named Reverend Martinez, smiled warmly as she reached the altar. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Richard Montgomery and Kayla Washington in holy matrimony. The power dynamic in that chapel was about to shift so dramatically that some of these people would need therapy. Marriage, Reverend Martinez continued, is built on love, trust, and commitment. It requires honesty, faithfulness, and the willingness to put your partner's needs above your own. Kayla almost laughed. Honesty and faithfulness, two concepts Richard had never quite mastered. If anyone present knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The chapel fell silent. This was the moment when movies got dramatic, when long-lost lovers burst through doors or family secrets got revealed. But real life wasn't a movie, and Kayla had never needed rescuing. She was the one doing the rescuing today, rescuing herself from a life built on lies. Actually, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent chapel, I do. The gasp that went up from 300 guests sounded like a windstorm. Phones came out instantly. Society people love drama, especially when it involved this much money. Richard's face went white. Kayla Dash. Shut up, she said pleasantly, her tone so calm it was terrifying. You've had your turn to talk. Now it's mine. She turned to face the congregation, all those powerful faces staring back at her in shock. Politicians who moved legislation, CEOs who control markets, entertainment moguls who shape culture, all of them about to get a front row seat to the most expensive education and betrayal ever performed. Thank you all for coming today, she began, her voice steady and strong. You flew in from around the country to witness what you thought was a wedding. Instead, you're about to see something much more rare, justice. Richard tried to step toward her, but she held up one perfectly manicured hand. 3 hours ago, I walked into a storage room looking for my grandmother's pearls. Instead, I found my fiancé in bed with my mother. The chapel erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of 300 phones capturing the moment when a wedding became a war crimes tribunal. Now, I know what you're thinking, Kayla continued, raising her voice above the chaos. Affairs happen. Hearts break. People move on. But this wasn't just an affair. She reached into her bouquet and pulled out a folded document. The modified prenup that would have stolen everything she had worked for. This was a business transaction, a hostile takeover disguised as a love story. Richard wasn't just stealing my heart. He was stealing my company, my assets, my entire future. And he was paying my mother to help him do it. The power she felt in that moment was intoxicating. Every person in that chapel hung on her words, and she was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Kayla smiled. Actually, she said, her voice carrying across the silent chapel, I do. And then she told them exactly why. Hell hath no fury like a woman who discovers her mother and fiancé plan to steal her life. The chapel erupted like a volcano. Gasps, shouts, and the sound of 300 phones capturing the moment when a wedding became a war crimes tribunal. But Kayla wasn't finished. She was just getting started. Richard Montgomery, she continued, her voice cutting through the chaos like a sword, convinced my mother to seduce him while planning to steal my business through a fraudulent prenup. The affair wasn't passion. It was a paid performance. She held up the bank statements Marcus had gathered, waving them like battle flags. $75,000 transferred to my mother's account over 6 weeks. Payment for services rendered, and the service was destroying her own daughter. Richard finally found his voice. Kayla, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? Her laugh echoed off the chapel walls. Really? Because I'm not the one who got caught fucking my fiancé's mother 2 hours before the wedding. The crowd gasped again. Reverend Martinez looked like he might faint, but Kayla felt alive, electric, powerful in a way she had never experienced. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, turning to address the stunned congregation. You came here expecting to witness love. Instead, you're seeing what happens when predators underestimate their prey. Maya stood frozen at the altar, bouquet forgotten in her hands. "Kayla, what are you doing?" "I'm taking my life back." Richard stepped toward her, desperation making him bold. "Kayla, please. Let's discuss this privately. These people don't need to hear Dash. These people deserve to know who they're doing business with." She cut him off. "How many of you have deals pending with Montgomery Tech? How many of you are about to trust this man with your money?" The question hit the crowd like a slap. She watched CEOs and investors exchange worried glances, watched phones come out as people started making calls to their lawyers and accountants. "The Patterson Industries merger," she continued, "was designed to absorb my marketing firm without compensation. After our marriage, Richard would have control my client base, my intellectual property, my entire professional network. The honeymoon wasn't going to be in Santorini. It was going to be in bankruptcy court." Patterson Industries executives in the third row looked like they had just swallowed poison. The merger deal they had spent months negotiating was crumbling in real time, along with Richard's reputation and their stock prices. "What's the most savage comeback you've ever witnessed? Tell me about justice served cold in the comments, because this was about to get even better." Her mother finally stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Kayla, baby, please Dash. Don't you dare call me baby." Kayla's voice turned to ice. "You gave up the right to call me anything when you chose money over your own daughter." "I never meant for this to happen," Denise sobbed. "I never meant to fall in love with him." "Fall in love?" Kayla's voice rose. "You think this is love? He's been using you, Mama. The same way he used me. The same way he uses everyone." She turned back to Richard, who stood pale and shaking at the altar. "Tell her, Richard. Tell my mother what happens to her after today. Tell her about the clause in your business agreement that cuts offer payments the minute this merger falls through." Richard's silence spoke louder than any confession. "He was going to dump you," Kayla told her mother. "As soon as he got what he wanted from me, you would have been yesterday's news." "Congratulations, Mama. You destroyed your relationship with your daughter for a man who never intended to keep you around." The security guards Richard had hired for the wedding were approaching the altar, but Kayla wasn't done. She had one final bomb to detonate. "Oh, and before anyone feels sorry for poor Richard," she said, pulling out her phone, "you should know this isn't his first time running this particular con. Marcus, my investigator, found 3 other women in the past 5 years. Same pattern, wealthy, successful women with businesses he could absorb. Same method, seduce a family member to create leverage." She held up photos Marcus had taken of Richard with other women, other families, other victims who had fallen for his charm. Sarah Chun in San Francisco. He seduced her sister. Maria Santos in Chicago. He went after her business partner. Jennifer Walsh in Dallas. Her own mother, just like mine. Richard Montgomery doesn't fall in love. He hunts. And today, you all got to see what happens when the prey fights back. The chapel had gone completely silent, except for the clicking of camera phones and the sound of her mother crying. Richard looked like a man watching his empire burn, which was exactly what he was doing. But as security escorted Richard and Denise out, Kayla realized her victory came with a price. She had won the battle, but the war for her future was just beginning. When the smoke cleared, she stood alone with the power to build or destroy everything they tried to steal. Miami skyline sparkled outside her lawyer's office windows. The city that witnessed her humiliation now watched her rise like a phoenix from designer ashes. 3 days had passed since the wedding that broke the internet, and Kayla's phone hadn't stopped ringing. 60 Minutes wants an exclusive, her publicist Sarah Martinez announced, scrolling through a tablet full of interview requests. Ellen's people called twice. Netflix is interested in the story rights. The woman who had been nobody special a week ago was now the most famous person in America. #Wedding Revenge was trending worldwide. Her public destruction of Richard Montgomery had become a masterclass in how to handle betrayal with style. But fame wasn't what she wanted. Power was. "What about the business calls?" Kayla asked, adjusting her position in the leather chair that cost more than most people's cars. "That's where it gets interesting," her lawyer, David Kim, said from behind his mahogany desk. 17 companies want to hire your firm. The Patterson Industries board fired their entire executive team and wants you to handle their rebranding. 3 different venture capital firms are offering to fund whatever you want to build next. The scandal that should have destroyed her had instead made her the most sought-after marketing executive in the country. Turns out, people love doing business with a woman who could burn down a billionaire's empire with nothing but the truth and perfect timing. "And Richard's situation?" she asked. David's smile was sharp as a blade. "Montgomery tech stock has dropped 40%. The SEC is investigating his business practices. 2 of his other victims have come forward with lawsuits. He's looking at criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and breach of fiduciary duty. If you suddenly had the power to change your entire life, what would you do first? What would you destroy and what would you build?" Because Kayla was about to show the world that revenge was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Girl, you're on the cover of Forbes. The woman who broke a billionaire. I'm so proud of you." Forbes. She had dreamed of being on that cover since business school, but never imagined it would happen like this. Never imagined she would become famous for refusing to be a victim. "There's something else," David said, his voice careful. "Your mother's been trying to reach you." Kayla's jaw tightened. "Through you, through everyone. Me, Sarah, your cousin Maya. She's desperate to talk." What could she possibly have to say? That she's broke. Richard cut off her payments the day after the wedding. She's facing eviction from her apartment in Charlotte. She wants to know if you'll help her. The laugh that escaped Kayla's throat was cold as winter. "She wants me to help her? After she tried to destroy my life for money." That's what I told her you'd say. But something twisted in Kayla's chest. Despite everything, Denise was still her mother. The same woman who had worked double shifts to pay for her education, who had sacrificed everything so her daughter could have opportunities she never did. "Set up a meeting," Kayla said finally. "But not here. Somewhere public. I want witnesses." Sarah looked up from her tablet. "Are you sure? The media attention around you and your mother meeting would be intense." "Good. Let them watch. Let everyone see what happens when you choose greed over family." That afternoon, Kayla stood in her new penthouse apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay. The space was 3 times the size of Richard's mansion, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel like she was floating above the city. She had signed the lease that morning, paying cash for a year up front with money from her suddenly booming business. New suitors had started circling within hours of her wedding disaster going viral. Powerful men who were drawn to her strength, her intelligence, her complete destruction of someone who had tried to break her. But their attention felt different than Richard's had. These men weren't trying to possess her. They were trying to impress her. The phone call came from an unexpected source. Someone who could help her turn this scandal into the foundation of an empire. But trusting anyone again meant risking everything she just won. "Miss Washington?" The voice was smooth, professional, slightly accented. "My name is Alessandro Reyes. I run Reyes Capital Group. I have a proposition that might interest you." She learned that sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something beautiful. The boardroom where she now held court buzzed with energy and possibility. From victim to CEO in 6 months, Atlanta's girl had become Miami's queen. The Kayla Washington Group occupied an entire floor of a downtown high-rise, with views of the ocean where Richard's yacht used to dock before the FBI seized it. Alessandro Reyes sat across from her at the conference table, his dark eyes focused on the presentation she had just finished. The venture capitalist had become more than a business partner over the past few months. He had become the kind of man who saw her strength as attractive instead of threatening. "Impressive," he said, closing his tablet. "You're projecting what kind of revenue for year 1? $50 million, Kayla replied without hesitation. "Conservative estimate. And that's just from the companies that have already signed contracts." She nodded. The Kayla Washington Group had become the most exclusive marketing firm in the country. Everyone wanted to hire the woman who had publicly destroyed a billionaire and walked away stronger. Her waiting list was 6 months long, and she could charge whatever she wanted. "The foundation is ready to launch," her assistant Jennifer announced from the doorway. "The press conference is set for tomorrow morning." The Kayla Washington Foundation for Economic Justice was her real masterpiece. using the settlement money from Richard's lawsuits, $12 million and counting. She was building something that would help women escape the kind of financial dependence that had made her mother vulnerable in the first place. What does it mean to truly rise above betrayal? How do you know when you've really healed? Share your comeback stories, because Kayla's was about to get even better. Alessandro reached across the table and took her hand. You know I'm proud of you, right? The touch was gentle, respectful, nothing like Richard's possessive grabs. Alessandro treated her like an equal partner, not a prize to be won. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared ambition rather than desperate passion and hidden agendas. I know, she said, squeezing his fingers. Thank you for believing in me when I barely believed in myself. You saved yourself. I just provided the capital. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. She's here. Kayla's stomach tightened. After 6 months of refusing contact, she had finally agreed to meet with her mother. But this wasn't going to be a tearful reunion or a forgiveness ceremony. This was going to be a reckoning. Denise looked smaller than Kayla remembered as Jennifer escorted her into the office. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple dress from Target. The confident woman who had seduced a billionaire had been replaced by someone who looked every one of her 53 years. Thank you for seeing me, Denise said quietly, her hands clasped in front of her like a child called to the principal's office. Sit down, Kayla said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Alessandro stood to leave, but Kayla stopped him. Stay. I want a witness for this conversation. Her mother's eyes flicked to Alessandro, then back to Kayla. I know you hate me. I don't hate you, Mama. Hate requires caring, and I stopped caring about you the moment you chose money over family. Denise flinched like she had been slapped. I never meant for things to go that far. Richard, he made me feel special, made me feel wanted. I hadn't felt that way in so long. So you decided to destroy your daughter's life for it. I thought there was enough love and money for both of us. I thought he really cared about me. Kayla's laugh was sharp. He was using you, Mama, the same way he tried to use me. The difference is, I was smart enough to figure it out before I lost everything. I lost everything anyway, Denise whispered. My apartment, my job, my daughter. Richard stopped returning my calls the day after the wedding. I've been living in my car for 2 weeks. The admission should have made Kayla feel sympathy. Instead, she felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Good, she said simply. Denise's head snapped up. Kayla Dash, you made a choice, Mama. You chose him over me. You chose money over family. You chose to betray the person who loved you most in the world. Now you get to live with the consequences. I'm homeless, Denise said, tears starting to fall. I'm 53 years old, and I'm homeless because I made one mistake. One mistake? Kayla's voice rose. You call sleeping with my fiancé for 6 weeks one mistake? You call conspiring to steal my business one mistake? You call taking money to destroy your own daughter one mistake? Alessandro's hand found her shoulder, steadying her. The gesture reminded her that she wasn't alone anymore, that she had people in her life who actually had her back. When Denise appeared at her office door, broken and begging for forgiveness, Kayla faced the ultimate test. Whether mercy makes you weak or strong. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of their betrayal. Mother and daughter sat across from each other in Kayla's penthouse office, the Miami skyline bearing witness to a conversation that would define both their futures. 6 months of silence stretched between them like a canyon that might never be crossed. Denise looked fragile in the afternoon light, her hands shaking as she reached into her worn purse. I brought something for you. She pulled out a small jewelry box, the velvet faded with age. Inside were the pearl earrings Kayla had been looking for on her wedding day, her grandmother's earrings that had started this whole nightmare. I took them, Denise admitted. That morning, I was in the storage room with Richard, and I saw them sitting there, and I took them. I don't know why. Kayla stared at the pearls that had connected 4 generations of women in her family. Her great-grandmother had worn them on her wedding day in 1943. Her grandmother had worn them when she married Kayla's grandfather in 1962. Her mother had worn them in 1985 when she married Kayla's father, before he abandoned them both. Keep them, Kayla said finally. What? Keep them? They obviously mean more to you than they do to me. Denise's face crumpled. They were supposed to be yours. On your wedding day. I don't need them anymore. I don't need anything that connects me to who I used to be. The woman sitting across from her had given birth to her, raised her, sacrificed for her. But she had also betrayed her in the deepest possible way. And Kayla was tired of carrying the weight of that betrayal around like a stone in her chest. I forgive you, she said suddenly. Denise looked up in shock. What? I forgive you for sleeping with Richard. I forgive you for taking his money. I forgive you for choosing him over me. I forgive you for all of it. Hope flickered in her mother's eyes. Does that mean Dash? It means I'm done carrying your betrayal around like it's my burden. It means I'm releasing myself from the prison of hating you. But it doesn't mean I trust you. It doesn't mean we're family again. It doesn't mean I'm going to save you from the consequences of your choices. Is forgiveness about the person who hurt you or about your own healing? What's the difference between forgiving and forgetting? Because Kayla was about to show her mother the difference between mercy and stupidity. Denise's face fell. So you're just going to let me stay homeless? Let me lose everything? You lost everything the moment you betrayed me. I'm just refusing to enable you to avoid the consequences. I'm your mother. No, Kayla said firmly. You are my mother. But mothers protect their children. They don't sell them out for money and sex. Alessandro appeared in the doorway, his timing perfect as always. Sorry to interrupt, but your 4 o'clock is here. Kayla stood, signaling that the conversation was over. Mama, I hope you figure out your life. I hope you find somewhere safe to live and someone who actually cares about you. But I can't be that person anymore. Denise clutched the jewelry box to her chest. What am I supposed to do? The same thing I did when you and Richard tried to destroy me. Figure it out. As her mother walked toward the door, broken and defeated, Kayla felt something she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not anger, not sadness. Relief. Pure, clean relief at finally cutting the rope that had been dragging her down. Kayla, Denise said, turning back one last time. For what it's worth, I am proud of you. What you've built, who you've become. I know I don't deserve to say that, but I needed you to know. The words hit harder than any apology could have, because they were true, and they were too late. Goodbye, Mama. After Denise left, Alessandro crossed the room and pulled Kayla into his arms. She melted against his chest, finally understanding the difference between being loved and being owned. How do you feel? He asked. Free, she said, and meant it. Her relationship with Alessandro had taught her what healthy love looked like. He supported her ambitions instead of trying to control them. He celebrated her success instead of feeling threatened by it. When she made business decisions, he asked how he could help instead of telling her what she should do. The intimacy they shared was built on trust and mutual respect, not manipulation and hidden agendas. When he touched her, she felt cherished instead of conquered. When he looked at her, she saw pride and admiration instead of calculation and possession. The foundation launch is tomorrow, he reminded her. You ready? I've been ready my whole life. As Denise walked away, Kayla realized the most powerful revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so successful that their betrayal became irrelevant. 2 years later, she stood where her wedding altar once was, but this time she was building something that couldn't be stolen, herself. The same Miami chapel, where she was almost betrayed, now hosted the launch of her foundation. 300 guests again, but this time they came to celebrate her rise, not witness her fall. Politicians who had watched her destroy Richard Montgomery now competed for her endorsement. CEOs who had seen her burn down a billionaire's empire now begged for her business advice. The chapel had been transformed into a conference center for the day, with screens displaying the Kayla Washington Foundation's mission, empowering women to achieve financial independence and escape economic abuse. It was personal, powerful, and exactly the kind of legacy she wanted to build. Alessandro stood at her side as she addressed the crowd, his presence steady and supportive without being possessive. They had been together for 18 months now, and he had never once tried to manage her career, control her choices, or make her smaller to make himself feel bigger. 2 years ago, Kayla began, her voice carrying clearly across the packed chapel. I stood in this same spot and learned that love without trust is just manipulation with better marketing. The crowd laughed, but she could see the serious attention in their eyes. Everyone knew her story. Everyone understood that her success had been forged in the fire of the most public betrayal in recent memory. Today, I'm standing here again, but this time I'm not a victim. I'm not a survivor. I'm a woman who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into the best thing she ever built. The Kayla Washington Foundation had already helped over 500 women escape financially abusive relationships. They provided business loans, legal assistance, job training, and most importantly, the kind of support system that helped women believe they could make it on their own. What would you build if you had to start over completely? What kind of empire would rise from your ashes? Tell me your dreams in the comments, because Kayla's was just getting started. In the front row sat Maya, now the foundation's director of operations. Beside her was Jennifer, who had become more than an assistant. She was family by choice, the kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought or manipulated. These are the people who had earned their place in her life through actions, not blood. Some of you knew Richard Montgomery, Kayla continued. Some of you did business with him. Some of you probably thought he was a good man who just made a mistake. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what I learned. People don't make mistakes. They make choices. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Richard was serving 18 months in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. His empire had been dismantled, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. The other women he had victimized were finally getting justice, finally getting their stories heard. The foundation we're launching today isn't about revenge, Kayla said. It's about prevention. It's about making sure other women never have to choose between financial security and personal dignity. As she spoke, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the back of the chapel. Her mother, looking older and frilier than she had 6 months ago, standing by herself near the exit. Their eyes met for a moment, and Denise raised her hand in a small wave. Kayla nodded once, acknowledgement without invitation. Some bridges could be rebuilt, but some distances were meant to be permanent. Love, she concluded, isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone who celebrates the complete person you already are. Alessandro's hand found hers as she finished speaking, their fingers intertwining naturally. He had proposed 3 months ago, but not with ultimatums or pressure. He had simply said he wanted to build a future with her, if she wanted to build one with him. The ring on her finger was smaller than the one Richard had given her, but it meant more because it came without conditions, without hidden contracts, without secret agendas. It was a partnership offer, not a takeover bid. As guests mingled after her speech, Kayla found herself standing exactly where she had been 2 years ago when her world exploded. But everything was different now. She was different now. She had learned that strength wasn't about avoiding betrayal. It was about surviving it with your dignity intact. She had learned that family wasn't about blood. It was about choice. She had learned that love wasn't about possession. It was about freedom. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Ready to go change the world? Alessandro asked, offering her his arm. I already am, she replied. And she was right. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. If this story inspired you to believe in your own comeback, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories about rising above betrayal and building empires from ashes. And remember, when people try to steal your happiness, don't just survive their betrayal. Thrive beyond their wildest imagination.